A few weeks ago, the Episcopal Bishop of New Hampshire, Robert Hirschfield, made national news for off-the-cuff comments he made to a small crowd gathered to mourn the murder of Renee Good. "We are entering a new era of martyrdom," he said, and revealed that he had encouraged clergy in his diocese to ensure that their affairs are in order, including having a will. "It may be," he noted, "that now is no longer the time for statements, but for us, with our bodies, to stand between the powers of this world and the most vulnerable." Apparently, he spoke about this to clergy of his diocese last fall, getting a reaction of surprise. Surprise indeed. I certainly never thought I would see the day when such a sentiment, such advice, would be spoken so close to home. And not just by some rogue bishop, but it is an increasingly shared perspective. Presiding Bishop Sean Rowe of the Episcopal Church has spoken similarly, overtly recognizing that the comfortable relationship the Church has long had with civil authorities has changed quickly. Overnight, it seems, the Church finds itself needing to climb out of bed with empire, to resist and oppose it instead. Cheap grace is the mortal enemy of the Church. So wrote famously German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer as the opening line of his 1937 book, Discipleship, or more commonly titled, in English anyway, The Cost of Discipleship. Bonhoeffer wrote it while he was leading an illegal underground seminary at Finkenwald in Nazi Germany. So much more than a general spiritual exhortation, it has been read for decades by well-meaning Christians with comfortable lives. Current theologian Tripp Fuller reminds us that it was actually a specific accusation against the German Church of 1937. For much of the 1930s, the German Church wrestled with its relationship with the civil authorities. On one end of the spectrum, some overtly supported the government. On the other end, Bonhoeffer and others resisted mightily, at the cost of many of their lives. In the middle, as Fuller describes, most considered themselves neutral, neither Nazi sympathizers nor active resistors. This middle group wanted to preserve their churches, their institutions and traditions, seeking stability through accommodation. This position was supported theologically by separating out the public and the private spheres. The public spheres of politics, economics, warfare were considered to be run by different rules than the private religious sphere of personal piety and individual spirituality. This way of thinking places the most difficult biblical teachings, particularly from Jesus and the ancient prophets, into the private personal sphere. That way, public policy, economics, international relations aren't impacted by commandments like love your enemies or pray for those who persecute you. This approach works well to maintain institutional stability while assuaging personal guilt. Unfortunately, it also ultimately supports the powers that be. And in the world of empire, neutrality is complicity. It's what Bonhoeffer called cheap grace. Grace that costs nothing is the mortal enemy of the Church, he contended. The tension between public and private piety also figures in our passage from the prophet Isaiah today. God's people are in the midst of rebuilding following the crisis of the Babylonian exile. After such a significant rupture in society, rebuilding involves much negotiation and shuffling around to work out how the new society will operate. Today, we hear the prophet's challenge to people who are fooling themselves. Day after day, they seek me, the Lord cries, and delight to know my ways. Sounds good, it starts well, and then, as happens so often in prophetic literature, kind of takes a turn, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. It's a pretty serious accusation, and the people understandably quickly challenge Isaiah right back. Why do we fast? Why humble ourselves? See, it's clear that they are in fact practicing a piety as the Lord commanded, at least on the outside. Or so they try to convince God, and maybe themselves too. God, however, sees through all our self-delusion. Look, the prophet says, you serve your own interest on your fast day and oppress all your workers. The issue is bluntly laid bare. Personal piety, fasting, prayer, spiritual practices are not ends in and of themselves. They aren't meant solely for our own interests. God's command, the fast God wills, is bigger than ourselves. God's will is for a just society where all are free to live and to share in the abundance that God generously gives. Is not this the fast that I choose, God says? To loose the bonds of injustice, to let the oppressed go free, to share your bread, to bring the homeless poor into your community, to clothe the naked? The state of society and the state of souls are connected. We don't get to separate out how we live in community, our politics and economics, from our personal connection with God. Reclaiming this prophetic truth preached by Isaiah, lived by Bonhoeffer, is what we are witnessing in our friends south of the border, and it is growing. On Friday, our primate, Shane Parker, released an open letter to presiding Bishop Rowe of the Episcopal Church, expressing his and all of our support, love, and prayers. Jesus taught, Archbishop Parker wrote, that those who hunger and thirst for righteousness are blessed. We want you to know that your courageous words and actions in the face of disturbing and dangerous challenges are themselves a blessing. And we want you to know that you are not alone. Be assured, he continues, that my prayers join with those offered across the Anglican Church of Canada, prayers for protection, courage, and peace. Prayers for a people who put their bodies between the state, the power of the state, and the most vulnerable. Along with praying, taking Isaiah's prophetic word seriously means that we too need to guard against our own self-delusions of holiness or purity. There are plenty of injustices right here in our own place that remain to be addressed. When we connect our personal prayer with our public justice making, God promises today through Isaiah, then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. May it be so.